Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're starting volume 4 today and studying chapters 1 through 10. If you're joining us for the first time or you've been joining us regularly, I'd like to welcome all of you. This new book that we're moving into, which is volume 4, we're going to be exploring some different chapters, mainly related to craving, desire, attachment, central desire. There's even some chapters that are referencing the cycle of rebirth that we can study as part of our class today. What we do in this class is we start with a brief meditation in order to help you prepare your mind for the class ahead. And that meditation is very, very brief, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, just really to help you get a little bit of a top up of your meditation before we actually start the class. Then after the meditation, we will have somebody read the chapter, either a student that's in Zoom or maybe myself. We will read the chapter. Then I will share some teachings on that particular chapter and open up to any questions that you might have. If you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your questions into the comment section and I'll see that and be able to answer any questions that you have. If you are in Zoom, you have the added feature of electronically raising your hand and asking any questions or follow-up questions directly. So I'd like to welcome you and invite you to join for meditation. You can take a position either seated, lying, or standing. These tend to work really well with online learning. There's also a walking position that you can learn. I usually teach this when I'm at the temple when students come to study with me there because it's much better to teach that in person versus online. But I do have some videos on our YouTube channel related to walking meditation where you could easily learn it through that as well. So if you're sitting on the floor or you're sitting in a chair, you just like your lower body and your hands and arms to be comfortable. The upper body can be nice and erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. And then you'd like to just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just establishing the breath. You can hang out here if you like. Or you can join in with the chants. I use the chanting just to kind of ease us into meditation. There's nothing mystical or magical about the chants. It's just to help ease the mind into meditation. And then afterwards, I'll be back with some more guidance to help you get further into the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sankho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anutero Puri sa Dhamma sati sata tava manusrang Hoto bhagavati. Okay, you'd like to just be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just establishing the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Your breath isn't going to necessarily match up with the guidance that I'm providing. I'm just here for guidance. This is your practice. So wherever you get to the next inhale, just use my voice as guidance to remember to breathe in through the nose. And whenever you're ready to exhale out through the nose. Here you're just establishing the breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath. No need to observe the thought, label it, analyze it, judge it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, just cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Samuno Sakhato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. If you guys would like to gradually make your way out of meditation, as I mentioned, this is just a real brief meditation just to kind of prepare the mind for studying. Normally, if you're going to be doing meditation as a full session, you like that to be as close to 30 minutes as possible or longer. But for these classes, we just do a brief little meditation just to help prepare the mind for the class so that you can clear things out and just help you to retain the teachings for a longer period of time and then apply them in your life for daily life. So as I mentioned, we're starting this volume 4, which is titled Exploring the Path to Enlightenment. This is a collection of teachings that are the words of the Buddha. And this is where you can see what the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach. Because oftentimes people in the world, they might be thinking that they're studying Buddhist teachings, but if they're not using the original words of the Buddha, then they're not understanding what he did teach and what he didn't teach. Because a Buddha is a discoverer, a declarer, an originator of the path to enlightenment. So a Buddha is laying down lights along the side of the path, making it very clear what it takes to get to enlightenment. And over the 2,500 years, people have changed his teachings and modified his teachings. And this is like, knocking over the lights so that they're not as clear of what the path is. So by you going back to the original words of the Buddha, you can see exactly what he did teach and what he didn't teach. And then you don't believe his teachings. You learn them, you reflect on them, and then you practice them. And then that reflection, you're trying to independently verify his teachings. So by not believing, you learning, reflecting to independently verify and practicing, you can get to wisdom. And getting to wisdom is what will help you to awaken the mind to this enlightened mental state where it's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You no longer experience any discontent feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. So the way that we typically do this class is I invite people from Zoom to read one of these chapters if you guys would like to read. And the part we're reading is only the words of the Buddha. There's the words of the Buddha, then there's the reference, which you can go back and look at the original source teachings of what the Buddha was maybe saying before this or after this. And then you have my words after that to help you reflect on what it is that the Buddha was actually teaching. And this will help you to more inform your practice. So if there's anyone in Zoom who would like to read the words of the Buddha, and then I'll share teachings on that and then open up the questions, you can just raise your hand electronically and I'll be able to call on you, and then you can read that particular chapter. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone's volunteering. Sometimes people can be a bit shy. So I'll go ahead and read this chapter. If there's ever a point during the time of this class where people in Zoom would like to read, you can just electronically raise your hand. And this can be really helpful to put the mind in the situation that maybe it's shy about. And this is how you get rid of discontentedness, is you put the mind in the situation that it's uncomfortable with and train it to be peaceful and content and joyful regardless. So an enlightened being isn't going to be shy. So feel free at any point to raise your hand electronically and I'll call on you. But otherwise, I'll just go ahead and read these chapters unless somebody volunteers. So the title of this chapter 1 is "A Small Amount of Existence is Not Praiseworthy." Here the Buddha says, "Monks, just as even a small amount of feces is foul-smelling, so too I do not praise even a small amount of existence, even for a mere finger snap. Monks, just as even a small amount of urine is foul-smelling, a small amount of saliva is foul-smelling, a small amount of pus is foul-smelling, a small amount of blood is foul-smelling, so too I do not praise even a small amount of existence, even for a mere finger snap." Okay, what the Buddha is doing here is he's pointing out that existence in the cycle of rebirth is something you shouldn't aspire for. Any unenlightened being is currently in the cycle of rebirth, where you keep experiencing the same things over and over and over again. You get mad about something, get angry about something, and you keep getting angry about that thing over and over and over again. And the mind is having craving, desire, attachment. This is what's leading to the discontent feelings. And as long as the mind has these cravings, desires, attachments, not only are you going to experience discontentedness, but you're going to experience continuous rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. If at the time of death there is craving in the mind, which craving is this longing and yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting things to be a certain way. If there's any craving, desire, attachment in the mind, there's going to be rebirth into a new existence. And there's 5 realms of existence. There's hell, animal realm, afflicted spirits, human realm, and the heavenly realm. Here in the human realm, we have the ability to train our mind and get to enlightenment and escape this whole cycle. So do the beings in the heavenly realm as well, but they tend to be somewhat complacent because they're only experiencing pleasant feelings. But these beings in the heavenly realm, because they don't typically actively work to get to enlightenment, they're often reborn into other realms. None of these realms are permanent. Depending on what you've been exposed to in the past, you might have been exposed to thinking that these realms are permanent, but indeed they're actually beings are moving in and out of these realms at different times. And here in the human realm, we have the ability to cultivate our mind, and we tend to be motivated because we have those pleasant feelings, the painful feelings, and the neither painful nor pleasant. But the Buddha is explaining that the whole purpose of his path in other teachings, he explains that the whole purpose is to get to enlightenment and eliminate discontentedness and escape this whole cycle of rebirth. He never uses the realms of existence or the cycle of rebirth to fear or guilt or shame you into learning and practicing his teachings, because what you're doing as part of getting to the enlightened mental state is eliminating guilt, shame, and fear. So he wouldn't use guilt, shame, and fear in order to motivate you to eliminate guilt, shame, and fear. But instead, he's just helping you to understand true reality, and that existing in the cycle of rebirth, while human existence is an ideal existence to get to enlightenment, and there are certain pleasurable things that you've experienced in the human existence that you currently have, there's also a lot of misery and grief and heartache and despair that you would rather not repeat if it was a choice and you had an actual choice. Well, the fact is that we do have a choice, that we can learn and we can practice and we can train our mind to get to enlightenment, where the rest of this life you'll experience the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state, no longer experiencing discontent feelings. And then you won't experience rebirth to come back and keep experiencing it all over again. There's some places that teach teachings that they refer to as Buddhism that will share with you that their goal is to not get to enlightenment, to experience rebirth, and that your goal should be to help other people get to enlightenment. And you should delay your enlightenment in order for you to be continuously reborn and brought back into the world so that you can help others to get to enlightenment. This is not what the Buddha actually taught. He taught to focus on your own mind and train your own mind to get to enlightenment. A person who's not enlightened wouldn't be able to guide other people to enlightenment. So the idea of not getting to enlightenment in order to help others get to enlightenment, if someone's not able to get to enlightenment on their own, they wouldn't be able to help others get to enlightenment. It's kind of like, if you were interested in learning to drive a car, would you be interested in learning from someone who's never driven a car before? Or would you like to learn from a teacher who has had 15 or 20 years of teaching people how to drive a car? Well, of course, you would be interested in learning from someone who has 15 or 20 years experience driving a car, and that's the person you would like to learn how to drive a car. So the idea of helping others get to enlightenment by delaying your enlightenment is actually fraught with errors and not what the Buddha taught. If you read his teachings and you see exactly what he taught for you to train your mind through learning, reflecting, and practicing, and you get to enlightenment. And here you can see very clearly that he says that existing in the world is not praiseworthy. It's not something that one should aspire to do. That as long as you're in existence, you're going to experience sickness, aging, and death. And that is very problematic for people in the unenlightened state, that experiencing continuous sickness, aging, and death over and over and over again is causing all kinds of despair and displeasure in the world. So you can train your mind in this life to get to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy and escape this whole cycle of rebirth. And this teaching and other teachings that the Buddha shares makes that very clear, that that's what he is teaching. That he's not teaching the Bodhisattva vow, which you'll see in other places that might share teachings that are referred to as Buddhist teachings. This isn't something that the Buddha actually taught. He taught to train your mind, get to enlightenment, and escape this whole cycle. And of course, along the way, as you're training your mind, there will be people who are interested in what you're doing, and you'll be able to potentially share a little bit of things here and there with them. But your main focus should always be your own practice and you getting to enlightenment by training your own mind. Let me see if you guys have any questions on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see your comments. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. All right, I don't see any in YouTube. Let me see if we have any questions in Facebook. And I don't see any in Facebook. So let's go ahead and move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 2. This one is titled, "One who is engaged is unliberated. One who is disengaged is liberated." And here, what the Buddha is doing is he's changing his language a bit, where he typically will talk about craving, desire, attachment, this mental longing and strong eagerness. Here he's using the words engaged, meaning craving, desire, attachment, and then disengaged, which is non-craving or non-desire, non-attachment. So someone who has craving, desire, attachment, their mind is unliberated. It's not free. You're still experiencing discontent feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others, these discontent feelings. But when your mind is practicing non-craving or it's disengaged, the mind is liberated from these strong feelings. The mind is free from these strong feelings. It's liberated. It is peaceful. It's calm, serene, and content with joy. So a teacher will sometimes use different words at different times to maintain the interest of the student, where if he just used the same words all the time, then students would maybe tune out about what he was teaching. So here he's changing his wording just a little bit, but he's referring to what students know of as craving, desire, attachment, expectations, wants, holding, grasping, things like this. So I'll read this one for you guys. It says, "Monks, one who is engaged is unliberated. One who is disengaged is liberated. Consciousness, monks, while standing, might stand engaged with form, based upon form, established upon form. With a sprinkling of excitement, it might come to growth, increase, and expansion. Or Consciousness, while standing, might stand engaged with feeling, based upon feeling, established upon feeling, with a sprinkling of excitement. It might come to growth, increase, and expansion. Or consciousness, while standing, might stand engaged with perception, based upon perception, established upon perception, with a sprinkling of excitement. It might come to growth, increase, and expansion. Or consciousness, while standing, might stand engaged with volitional formations, choices, decisions, based upon volitional formations, established upon volitional formations, with a sprinkling of excitement. It might come to growth, increase, and expansion. Monks, though someone might say, separated from form, separated from feeling, separated from perception, separated from volitional formations, I will make known the coming and going of consciousness, its passing away and rebirth, its growth, increase, and expansion, is impossible. Monks, if a monk has abandoned desire for the form aggregate, with the abandoning of craving, the basis is cut off. There is no support for the establishing of consciousness. If he has abandoned desire for the feeling aggregate, for the perception aggregate, for the volitional formations or choices, decisions aggregate, for the consciousness aggregate, with the abandoning of craving, the basis is cut off. There is no support for the establishing of consciousness. When that consciousness is unestablished, not coming to growth, non-generative, the mind is liberated. By being liberated, the mind is steady. By being steady, the mind is content. By being content, one is non-agitated. By being unagitated, one personally attains nibbana, enlightenment. One understands destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of existence. Okay, the teaching here has quite a bit of details that you would need to have learned prior to fully understanding this, that are part of the other volumes of the books. Now that we're in volume 4, it's building upon knowledge and wisdom that you would have gained in some of the other books and other chapters. So let me kind of help those of you guys that maybe haven't been exposed to those teachings yet. Here, the Buddha is talking about the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. These are what's called the 5 aggregates, or 5 collections, or 5 elements. These are the 5 elements that make a living being a living being. That you have physical form, which is the physical body. You have feelings. You have perceptions. Perceptions are the way you look out at the world, your views and opinions of the world. Volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then there's a consciousness, which is the mind. So any being that has these 5 aggregates or 5 elements, this is a living being. So you can look at birds and snakes and cows and dogs and monkeys and say, yeah, all of these beings have the 5 aggregates. But you can look at the electronic device that you're listening to this on right now, and this electronic device doesn't have the 5 aggregates. It has physical form, but it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have perceptions. It doesn't have volitional formations, and it doesn't have consciousness. And that's why it's not a living being. So you can look out at the world and you can discern and figure out what is a living being if you understand these 5 aggregates. And then what you understand in other parts of the teachings of the Buddha is one of the things that the unenlightened mind is doing is it's clinging or holding on to these 5 aggregates. And the mind is wanting these to be permanent. So if you're holding on to this physical form of the body, wanting it to be permanent, when you were in your youth, you might have been clinging to this body thinking that you're going to be permanently youthful. And then when you see the first little wrinkle or the first gray hair, or you get the first little, fat around the stomach or the hips or the thighs, you might have been, oh my goodness, right? And just been shaken up by that. And this is the mind clinging to the physical form, wanting it to be permanent. But yet, because of the universal truth of impermanence, we understand that this physical body is impermanent. It's not possible for it to permanently be one particular way. But because the unenlightened mind doesn't understand this universal truth, it's clinging and craving for permanence, so therefore it gets shaken up when it sees something's wrong with the physical form of the body. Maybe even a sickness. If you get sick, you might have been craving permanent health, and therefore you feel miserable when you're sick, not realizing that you can't be permanently healthy. It's not possible. And then also, like, you can't be permanently healthy, the sickness isn't permanent either. That will eventually be gone as well. And each one of these, whether it's the physical form, the feelings in the mind, these are not permanent. The perceptions, the views and opinions you have about the world, your choices and decisions, and the consciousness, none of this is permanent. But the unenlightened mind oftentimes craves it to be permanent. So if you take something like the perceptions, your views and opinions about the world, if you've ever been in an argument with somebody, arguing your views and opinions about how you feel about the world and trying to convince this person that your views and opinions are correct or accurate, this is the mind clinging to your views and opinions, where you can understand, because of the universal truth of impermanence, that everybody's going to have a different view and opinion, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we need to fight or we need to be argumentative to try to convince somebody to agree with us. Of course, other people are going to have a different view or opinion because their experiences in life have been different. And the same thing with our choices and decisions. We tend to cling to these in the unenlightened state, where you make a decision and maybe you're going to go on holiday 6 months from now and you would like to go to Australia or Canada or some other place. And now, as time goes on, you're clinging to this decision perhaps. And then when you get close to that time, maybe you can't afford to go, but you become very discontent and frustrated because you can't go. Or maybe you show up at the airport and your flight is delayed or it's canceled, and now you get frustrated and irritated. This is because the mind's clinging and craving to go on this trip. Or maybe you're craving and clinging. Maybe there's a money thing, or maybe it's about your time or something like this. And as long as the mind's craving and clinging to your decisions, you're going to continue to experience situations where the mind becomes frustrated or angry or some other discontent feeling. So the Buddha is saying, when you're engaged, meaning you're engaged with these 5 aggregates and you're clinging to them and you're holding on to them, your mind is unliberated. You're not going to be able to experience the peace and joy because you're going to want things to be a certain way, and you can only experience pleasant feelings when you get things your way. But then the problem with that is if you get things your way, this is conditional happiness. It's temporary. Your happiness is based on some condition, that if I get what I want, then I'll be happy. But that condition is impermanent. So when that condition changes, now your mind moves to these painful feelings like sadness, frustration, or some other discontent feeling that is quite painful. So you can liberate the mind from all of this by not being engaged. You can become disengaged, meaning you practice non-craving or non-clinging. So as it relates to the body, we understand that craving the body to be permanently one way would cause discontentedness in the mind. But also, if we never attended to the body and took care of it, that wouldn't be wise either. So we practice this middle way, where yes, we do need to have good hygiene. We need to brush our teeth. We need to wash our hair. We need to, do different things like this. But we don't do this obsessively. We don't obsess about it, because that's what's going to cause the mind to be discontent. We understand that this body is impermanent, but we try to eat healthy food. We try to exercise if we can. We try to do certain things for the mind and training the mind and things like this. So you practice this middle way where you make wise decisions towards achieving a certain goal or objective rather than longing, yearning, and obsessing about it. So the Buddha is saying that as long as one is engaged or craving any of these 5 aggregates, and you're experiencing this excitement when you get what you want, then your craving is just going to continue to grow and increase and expand. And he gets down here and he talks about saying that, okay, if somebody says that separated from form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, they will make known the coming and going of consciousness and the passing away and rebirth. He's saying this is impossible, because it's not just being separated from form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness that you're going to understand something like the cycle of rebirth. But instead, you need to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. So there's kind of 2 steps in eliminating a craving, desire, attachment. There's separating yourself from it, meaning distancing yourself from it. But in that situation, you can still have the craving in the mind. Then there's actually eliminating the craving itself. So let me just take something silly. Let's just say that you were addicted to chocolate and you were just eating chocolate every day, every day, every day, eating chocolate. And now you decided you're going to try to eliminate this craving. Well, the first step is to separate yourself from it, put more distance between you and chocolate, and not go into the store where there's chocolate and train your mind to be distant from this chocolate. But even in doing that, you still have the craving in your mind for the chocolate, even though you've been separated from it. And now you need to, as you're separated from it, you need to start working on eliminating the craving in the mind where you're not longing, yearning, and obsessed about this chocolate. And then ultimately, once you eliminate your craving, should you choose to go back and start eating chocolate again, that's up to you, right? But if you would like to eliminate the craving for something, you need to typically first distance yourself from it, and then you need to work on eliminating the craving from the mind, because the object itself isn't the craving. The craving, desire, attachment is embedded in the mind. So distancing yourself from the object of its affection will help you to eliminate the craving, but the craving can still persist even though you're separated from it. So that's why the Buddha is saying that you can't come to understand the cycle of rebirth and all these other teachings by just separating yourself from these things. You need to actually abandon the desire. You need to eliminate the craving. And that's what he's talking about here in this next paragraph, is that he's saying that you need to abandon it. You need to eliminate it. Ultimately, in some places, he talks about destroying it. Here, he's talking about cutting off the craving at the base. And this is how you ensure that there's not rebirth. That if you just separate yourself from something and you still have craving in the mind, at the time of death, there's going to be rebirth. But if you separate yourself from it and you cut off the craving at the core, at the root, which is in the mind, then there's no support for the establishment of consciousness. There cannot be rebirth if you've eliminated the craving deeply embedded in the mind. And then when that consciousness is unestablished, meaning that there is no craving, desire, attachment that's going to produce the next consciousness, then the mind is liberated. So the way you can think about craving, desire, attachment is it's like fuel. It's fueling this fire inside the mind, that as long as this mind still has fuel at the end of this life, it's going to create another fire, so to speak. So if you think about a fire and there's logs that are being tossed on the fire. As long as there's logs being tossed on the fire, there's going to be sparks that come off of that fire, and the wind's going to carry that spark, and then it's going to land, and it's going to light a new fire, right? So as long as you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind, it's like this fire. And if you haven't extinguished it by the end of this life, it's going to produce a spark that lights the next fire, or that creates the next life, or the next consciousness. So the Buddha is saying that when there's craving, desire, attachment has been extinguished, then there's no ability for the consciousness to become established, because there's no fuel, there's no spark to create that next consciousness. And now the mind's liberated. So if you get to enlightenment at age 35, 45, 55, 65, what have you, you will live the rest of that life with peacefulness, calmness, serenity, and contentedness with joy. But then at death, there won't be any more rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha leaves the teaching of once you attain enlightenment and die, he leaves this as undeclared. So he doesn't say if there is something next or there isn't something next. But he does teach that if you don't attain enlightenment, there is rebirth. And he explains to you throughout all of his different teachings about why that is and how it is accomplished. But mainly what he's focused on in his teachings is helping you eliminate discontentedness, getting rid of the pollutions of mind through training the mind. But there are certain places like this where he's teaching you about how consciousness comes to be, so that you understand how important it is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. Because by eliminating craving, desire, attachment, not only do you eliminate discontentedness of the mind, but you eliminate continuous rebirth. It's like a 2-for-1 special. So if you like shopping and you like getting 2-for-1 specials, this is one of those things. You can do one thing, which is eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and you're getting 2 benefits. Is 1, you eliminate discontentedness for the rest of this life, and you experience peace and joy. And then 2, you don't experience rebirth and keep coming back into the world over and over again. And the Buddha explains a little bit of that here in the last part of this teaching, where he says, once you have eliminated craving, desire, attachment, the mind is liberated. When the mind's liberated, the mind is steady. Because as long as you have this longing and yearning in the mind, this craving and desire, your mind's going to go up and down and up and down. It's not going to be steady and calm. So when the mind's eliminated craving, desire, attachment, it's liberated from these strong feelings, it can be steady, it can be calm, it can be joyful. And when the mind's steady, it's content. When the mind's content, it's not agitated. It's not experiencing even the slightest annoyance by the time you get to enlightenment. Being unagitated, one has attained enlightenment, or nibbana. That's the Pali word for enlightenment. And then having attained enlightenment, one understands that birth is destroyed, that you're no longer going to experience rebirth. You might not understand that right now at this particular moment in your practice, but as you evolve on this path to enlightenment and you see these teachings are impactful and that they're helping you and they're gradually improving the condition of your mind, and you at some point maybe dive into the teachings on the cycle of rebirth, you will know when you've attained enlightenment, because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You haven't experienced any discontent feelings whatsoever. And you know that these teachings is what led you there, because you've done a lot of work in order to train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. And now, having done all that work, you would have probably explored the cycle of rebirth at some point, and you will have known that all the teachings of the Buddha led you to this enlightened mental state, just like he said it did. And then also, you won't experience this rebirth. And there's ways to independently verify the cycle of rebirth so you can see that it's true. And having eliminated craving, gotten to enlightenment, and understanding that there is no rebirth, the Buddha says the holy life has been lived. You've lived this holy life in terms of training your mind to get to enlightenment. What had to be done has been done, meaning you've done the training, you've gained the wisdom, you've accumulated the wisdom, you've accomplished what you needed to accomplish, and now there's no more for this state of existence. There's no more rebirth, because you've done what you've had to do in order to train the mind to let go. Because part of what craving, desire, attachment is doing is it's holding on to this world, wanting this world to be a certain way. And as long as your mind is holding on, it's going to keep coming back and experiencing life over and over and over again. But when you can cultivate wisdom, whether it's about a particular challenge that you're facing or the overall challenge of a discontent mind, then once you cultivate the wisdom, you no longer struggle and have difficulties. The whole reason why the unenlightened mind has difficulties and struggles in the world is just because it lacks wisdom. And when you're experiencing certain struggles and difficulties, this is because there's certain wisdom that you don't have. So if you can cultivate that wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing, you can overcome the struggles and difficulties through acquiring wisdom. And now you can get closer and closer to this peaceful and joyful mental state. So let me see what questions you guys have here. I see there's one coming in on Zoom. It says, due to serious illness, I got disabled and feel pain, tightness and tingling 24 hours. I become dependent upon others since 2022. I feel so worried all the time. Any suggestions, please? Yeah, so you would need to learn and practice the entire path to enlightenment to eliminate that worry and that stress that you're experiencing. And even that pain will be minimized significantly as you train the mind on this path to enlightenment. There isn't just one thing to do or one thing that I could teach you in a 2-minute response or a 5-minute response to your question that's going to fix all of this. But if you start with this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, Volume 1, which you can get from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. You can download it for free, and from there, you'll be able to read it, or you can get a printed copy. Wherever you are in the world, if you have access to Amazon, you can get this book if you prefer a printed copy. Or you can even take the file and go print it yourself if you like. But you're going to need to gradually learn all the different factors of the Eightfold Path. In this first book, it lays down a really strong foundation and framework to help you understand the path to enlightenment. And I teach that on Sundays and Wednesdays. So you would like to attend those Sundays classes and Wednesday classes. And if you can attend live, wonderful. In certain situations where you can't attend live, they're recorded. So you'll be able to digest the content through the recording. But slowly but surely you build up your practice to include meditation, but other aspects of practice too, because you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. So there's a whole variety of training that the Buddha shares that helps you train your mind. And by training your mind, you can eliminate the worry, you can eliminate the stress, and even the pain. You won't eliminate it 100%, but the mind will relate to this pain differently. In the unenlightened state, when we're untrained, we crave permanent health. We crave permanent comfort. So when the mind is when the body is experiencing physical pain, not only is there the physical pain, in the unenlightened state, there's also mental anguish that goes along with it. And it intensifies the pain in the body. It's like getting hit with two darts. The first dart is the physical pain. And then the second dart is the mental anguish that the mind is now craving permanent comfort. And because you can't get to permanent comfort, the mind experiences this mental anguish. So by the time you're training your mind, you'll still experience some physical pain, but it'll be very muted and very diminished because you won't experience the mental anguish associated with the physical pain. But you've got to start out on the path with this first book, volume 1, and there's videos that I teach, mini lessons, there's online classes, there's books, there's audiobooks. If you prefer to listen to this in audiobook format, you can do it that way. There's lots of different resources that I made available. If you're having any challenges finding these resources, you can send me a private message, or you can schedule a personal guidance session, and I'll be sure I connect you with all the different resources that you need. And as you're learning in the resources, you can be asking questions in classes, you can be posting them in the Facebook group, you can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance that I will help you. And all of this is available to you at no cost. So you just need to have the dedication and determination to step forward and get involved with the resources and digesting the content so you can actively train the mind. All right, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. It looks like we might have a question here on YouTube. When the Buddha speaks of excitement here, is he speaking of pleasure experienced from attaining what the mind is craving? Yes, when the Buddha is talking about like the destruction of excitement, sometimes people get a little bit worried. It's like, hold on a second, if I get to enlightenment, I'm not going to feel excitement anymore. Well, what he's talking about is conditional excitement. What he's referring to is those pleasant feelings, the happiness, excitement, elation, exhilaration, thrill, euphoria. The way that the unenlightened mind functions is it can only experience those pleasant feelings based on conditions. That if this condition's met, and this condition's met, and this condition's met, and this condition met, I will get excited. So if it's sunny outside and I can go hiking and my life partner comes with me, or my children come with me, or I can take my favorite water bottle with me or whatever, the mind is happy or excited. But the problem with that is those conditions are impermanent. So as long as you're basing your inner feelings on these conditions, that means you can't be permanently happy, because there's these conditional experiences that have to be true or have to be met in order for you to be happy. So what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're eliminating these conditions, where the mind is unconditioned, where you can be joyful. Or another way to think about it is unconditioned happiness, where all day long you can be happy all the time, because it doesn't have to have any particular conditions met in order for you to be happy or excited. So you can enjoy the present moment and enjoy that present moment without it being conditional excitement or conditional happiness based on the condition of what you're experiencing at any given time. When we were talking about this at the temple today, I gave the example of how, if I had conditional excitement, when students showed up for class, I would be excited. Like, oh, there's students coming. Yay, there's 20, 30 students. Yay, I'm so excited. So now the next day I show up and there's one student or two students, or there's no students. In that situation, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be angry, or you're going to feel some kind of irritation or agitation. If you allow the mind to get conditional excitement It's only a matter of time before those conditions don't exist, and now your mind's going to experience the painful feelings. So what you're doing is you're rewiring the mind, or you're training the mind to no longer experience conditional feelings, but instead you can enjoy the present moment, and now you enjoy it and then you move on. Another example might be if I was eating a piece of chocolate cake at a restaurant. You know that that chocolate cake is enjoyable. Wow, it tastes really nice. But as soon as your mind starts craving it and longing for it, and you base your inner feelings on the fact that you're eating this chocolate cake, now the next time you come to the restaurant, you really want that chocolate cake. And you order that chocolate cake, and if they have it, you get excited. But now, if they come back and they say, sorry, we ran out of the chocolate cake, now you'll be frustrated or agitated or irritated. This is what conditional feelings are going to do to you. You're going to go up and down and up and down. So the enlightened mind is beyond all of this. It's no longer going up and down and up and down. It's unagitated. It's just always joyful. And when you see the Buddha talking about eliminating excitement or destroying excitement, he's talking about those conditional feelings that are only experienced if some condition is met. And you're trying to get beyond that, where your mind is just always joyful, no matter what's going on in life, despite what's going on in life. Let's see if we have any questions in Facebook. And those of you guys in Zoom, remember, you're always welcome to raise your hand if you have any questions as well, or put them in the comment section. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So let's move on to chapter 3. Looks like Max is going to volunteer to read this one. Go ahead, Max.
Thank you, sir. One dwelling with craving as a partner. Venerable sir, in what way is one dwelling with a partner? There are megajala, forms recognizable by the eye that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk seeks excitement in them, welcomes them, and remains holding to them, excitement arises. When there is excitement, there is obsession of mind. When there is obsession of mind, there is bondage. Bound by the fetter of sensual desire, megajala, a monk is called one dwelling with a partner. There are megajala, sounds recognizable by the ear, odors recognizable by the nose, flavors recognizable by the tongue, physical objects recognizable by the body, mental objects recognizable by the mind that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk seeks excitement in them, he is called one dwelling with a partner. Megajala, even though a monk who dwells thus resorts to forests and groves, to remote lodgings where there are few sounds and little noises, unoccupied, hidden from people, appropriate for seclusion, he is still called one dwelling with a partner. For what reason? Because craving is his partner and he has not abandoned it. Therefore, he is called one dwelling with a partner. Venerable sir, in what way is one a lone dweller? There are, megajala, forms recognizable by the eye that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk does not seek enticement in them, does not welcome them, and does not remain holding to them, excitement is eliminated. When there is no excitement, there is no obsession of mind. When there is no obsession of mind, there is no bondage. Released from the fetter of sensual desire, megajala, a monk is called a lone dweller. There are, megajala, sounds recognizable by the ear, odors recognizable by the nose, flavors recognizable by the tongue, physical objects recognizable by the body, mental objects recognizable by the mind that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk does not seek excitement in them, he is called a lone dweller. Megajala, even though a monk who dwells thus lives in the vicinity of a village, associating with male and female ordained practitioners, with male and female household practitioners, with kings and royal ministers, with sectarian teachers and their disciples, he is still called a lone dweller. For what reason? Because craving is his partner, and he has abandoned it. Therefore, he is called a lone dweller.
All right. Thank you, Max. So here the Buddha is starting to focus in on this fetter of sensual desire. The Buddha describes his teachings, and he goes layer by layer and going deeper and deeper into his teachings. In the Four Noble Truths, you understand in four simple statements the problem, the cause of the problem, the elimination, and the path forward. And the cause of the discontent feelings is craving, desire, attachment. But then he goes deeper at other parts of his teachings, and he talks about craving, anger, and ignorance. These are like the three poisons or three unwholesome roots or three fires. And this explains what's happening in the unenlightened mind at a certain level of detail. And he provides certain solutions at that level of detail. But then he goes deeper in what's called the 10 fetters. What a fetter is it's like a shackle around your ankle with a chain and a ball. It's like keeping you like a prisoner, stuck in this discontent mind, this unenlightened state, in the cycle of rebirth. These 10 fetters are the 10 pollutions or defilements or taints that are hindering the mind from experiencing this brightness and this radiance and this joy of the enlightened mental state. So in the Buddhist teachings, you'll see these 10 fetters, and he describes what they are, and he's explaining to you how to eliminate them. Because when you eliminate these 10 pollutions of mind, that's when the mind's going to experience enlightenment. And as you're eliminating and eroding these pollutions of mind, you'll see this gradual improvement as you're progressing. It's not like one day you're enlightened and the next day, it's not like one day you're unenlightened and the next day you're enlightened. There's a gradual progression towards it. So as you're gradually eliminating the 10 fetters, you're gradually experiencing more and more improved benefits of the enlightened mind, like peaceful, calm, serenity, content with joy, or focus, concentration, clarity of mind, deep memory. Your personal and professional relationships will blossom, and you'll see that you will no longer be in a bad mood because the conditions that are causing the bad mood have been eliminated, so you'll just always be in a good mood as an enlightened being. So here, the Buddha is focusing in on this fetter of sensual desire, because this is one that tends to be very challenging for people to eliminate, because this is where the mind is craving through the sense bases, wanting agreeable contact. So the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. These are called the 6 sense bases. And the mind has this longing and yearning where you want agreeable contact. So you would like to see agreeable things. And when you see agreeable things that are agreeable to you, you get pleasant feelings. And when you see something disagreeable, you get painful feelings. Or when you hear something that is agreeable, you get pleasant feelings. When you hear something disagreeable, you get painful feelings, and so forth and so on. Whether it's an odor, whether it's a flavor on the tongue, whether it's bodily contact, or a mental object in the mind. So giving you an example, say that you were sitting at a traffic light and you were just sitting there at the red light, and someone pulls up to you with some amazing music you think is so wonderful. And you get all these pleasant feelings because it's agreeable, it's great music, you think it's wonderful. And now you pull off from that light and you go to the next light, and another car pulls up. But this music, you don't like it. You just think it's horrible. And now you feel frustrated or agitated. This is because of craving, desire, attachment. The mind's craving this agreeable contact. You want to hear certain sounds that are agreeable to you. And when you hear disagreeable sounds, now your mind is agitated. And this is all being caused by the mind itself. It's not being caused by the music. The music is just a sound. But if the mind has craving, where it's craving something to be permanent, now you're craving for things to be permanently sounding the way you like, or some agreeable sound, then you can only experience pleasant feelings when you hear something agreeable to you. So when you hear something disagreeable, the mind experiences painful feelings. And this is all because of the craving, desire, attachment in the mind. So what the Buddha is saying here is, if you seek excitement in anything through these sense bases, whether it's forms that you see, sounds that you hear, odors that you smell, flavors that you taste, physical objects that touch the body, or mental objects that come into the mind, if you seek excitement in them, if you welcome them, if you remain holding to them, excitement is going to arise in the mind. This is a conditional feeling. And this is where you don't believe the teachings of the Buddha, you can see for yourself, right? Then when there's excitement in the mind, then the mind becomes obsessed with that particular thing. And then when there's obsession in the mind, there's bondage, meaning you're stuck, right? You're stuck in the cycle of rebirth. And now when the mind is having this fetter of sensual desire, one is called dwelling with a partner. You're dwelling with this partner of sensual desire because you have to always feed this partner of sensual desire. You need to feed it its cravings, and that's the only way that it can be experiencing pleasant feelings. But the problem is that you can't do that permanently, that eventually the mind's going to not get something at once, and it's going to experience these painful feelings. So now the Buddha says, okay, if you're interested in kind of getting liberated from all of this and being a lone dweller, now you don't welcome, right? You don't seek excitement. You don't welcome these things. You don't remain holding on to them. And then that way, this conditional excitement is eliminated. And now you can enjoy the present moment and enjoy what you're experiencing. But now you won't experience those painful feelings either. You don't have to feed this craving, desire, attachment of excitement. So therefore, you're not going to experience the painful feelings either. When there's no excitement, there's no obsession of mind. You're not obsessing about that piece of chocolate cake, or you're not obsessing about a certain number of students being in class, that your mind can just be content and peaceful no matter what you eat. You can train your mind to not have this sensual desire. And then having done so, the Buddha says, okay, because craving is his partner and that cravings have been abandoned, therefore, he is called a lone dweller, meaning that you're not having to feed this partner of craving, desire, attachment. Any questions on this chapter? Max?
Just Migajalo was just one of the students asking a question?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
And you pronounced that much better than I would have. I would have just said student. All right, let's see. We have a question here in YouTube as well. If I'm understanding the teaching here correctly, it is okay to enjoy it in the moment as long as let the experience and enjoyment go, and we do not crave this experience. Is this correct? Absolutely, Bruce. That's what you're looking to do, is that in the present moment, you're going to enjoy spending time with your children. You're going to enjoy spending time with your wife or your husband or your partner or your family members or whatever you're doing. You're enjoying the present moment, but you're not allowing the mind to base its inner feelings on that thing. So therefore, because you're not craving it, then whether you're doing that thing or not, you're completely content. So I'll give you an example from the temple today, that I was teaching from 9 a.m. until 10:30, and then we take a break at 10:30, and we usually come back at 11. And I went to the bathroom at 10:30, and I came out, and all the meditation cushions were gone. So my thought was, okay, everybody's left. I'll just turn off everything and leave. And as I was locking up the door, another student showed up, and I was like, oh, you showed up. I didn't realize you were coming for class. So they're like, okay, let's sit down. And we sat at the table in front of the classroom and we started talking. And then a second student joined and a third student joined. And then more students started coming back. So then we decided, okay, we're going to go back into the classroom, right? We didn't cling to any particular thing. And instead, we just moved with whatever was happening. So when I was in the classroom, it looked like there were students there. So we studied until 10:30, came out, there was no students there. Okay, time to leave. As I was leaving and made the decision to leave, oh, another student came on. Okay, well, let me teach this student. We'll sit down here at the table. Okay, more students came. Okay, well, let's not sit here at the table. Let's go inside. So you can train your mind to just let go, just stay in the moment and not crave any one particular thing. Or like the chocolate cake example that I gave, that you can enjoy that in the present moment, but don't allow the mind to base its inner feelings like, oh my goodness, this is the best piece of chocolate cake. I can't wait to get back here and have another piece. Or another example I gave this morning is like, say you're on a drive and you're going through the mountains and you pull over and there's a nice scenery and you get out of the car and you see this beautiful scenery. Well, if the mind is practicing non-attachment, you're going to see that beautiful scenery. And it's like, oh, it's just so beautiful out here. Look at how the sun is shining down on those mountains, and there's clouds, and there's birds, and the trees, and the fresh air. Wow, this is so beautiful. You'll enjoy it for the present moment. And then when it's time to get in the car, you'll get in the car and you'll leave. Okay, we're off to the next thing. But if the mind is craving and clinging, you're out there enjoying the view, and it's like, oh my goodness, I could stay here forever. This is the best thing ever. I don't ever want to leave. This is so wonderful. And now somebody says, hey, it's time to leave. Oh, I don't want to leave. Oh, it's so beautiful out here. The mind becomes discontent because it's craving to stay there and see that scenery. So it's a matter of training the mind to enjoy the present moment and enjoy what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and then be willing to just move on. If that's what you need to do, is just move on. Don't cling to this experience wanting it to be permanent. So you've got that 100% correct there, Bruce. Max, looks like you have a question.
Yes, I have a question kind of over this topic, and it also relates to right speech. So I frequently joke saying something like, oh, this is the best chocolate cake I have ever had today. Joking that, of course, like, okay, this is the only chocolate cake I've had today. And it's also, like also would be the best, like the best cake I've had today. Is that right? Would right speech be okay in that type of joking situation or not?
Yeah, you're telling the truth, right? Yeah.
Yes, it frequently makes people laugh, but and I think it's funny myself, because it's like, this is the best whatever I've had today or whatever, or I'll ask like my kids, like, is this the best sandwich you've had today, or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like right speech to me, because you're not lying, right? So yeah, you're joking, you're having fun, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people think that an enlightened being is just sitting on a cloud somewhere, meditating and just, never experiencing anything, any kind of fulfillment. But it's actually just the opposite. Is an enlightened being is fully fulfilled, fully satisfied. You're experiencing so much more enjoyment out of life than you ever experienced in the unenlightened state. In the unenlightened state, your mind goes up into those temporary pleasant feelings, but it's going to come back down into the painful feelings. The enlightened mind doesn't experience that. You're just always joyful. So you're actually enjoying life way more in the enlightened mental state than you ever did in the unenlightened mental state. And that's where the joy starts coming into the mind more and more, as you're training your mind to let go of these cravings, because you can be peaceful and joyful no matter what's going on. Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so I'm not seeing any more questions anywhere, so we'll just go ahead and move on to the next chapter. Chapter 4. And okay, go ahead, Max.
Let me get situated, sorry. This holy life is lived for the abandoning of existence. This world is burning, harmed by contact it calls disease a self. By whatever means it understands anything, it becomes otherwise than that. Becoming otherwise, the world is attached to becoming harmed by existence, and yet has excitement in that very existence. Where there's excitement, there is fear. What one fears is stressful. This holy life is lived for the abandoning of existence. Whatever ascetics or Brahmins say that liberation from existence is by means of existence, all of them are not released from existence, I say. And whatever ascetics or Brahmins say that escape from existence is by means of non-existence, all of them have not escaped from existence, I say. For this stress comes into play in dependence of every gain of material possessions. With the ending of every craving desire, there's no stress coming into play. Look at this world. Beings afflicted with thick ignorance, unknowing of true reality, are unreleased from passion for what has come to be. All levels of existence, anywhere, in any way, are impermanent, stressful, subject to change. Seeing this as it's come to be, the right wisdom, one abandons craving for existence and doesn't have excitement in non-existence. From the total ending of craving comes fading and elimination without remainder, liberation, enlightenment. For the monk who is liberated through lack of craving, desire, there's no further existence. He has conquered Mara, won the battle, having gone beyond existences such.
Okay, thanks, Max. So here, I'll just point out that this particular teaching is very detailed. And what I've done here, and this is one of the reasons why you'd like to read these books before or after class, is I've taken each individual line that the Buddha teaches, and then I've given you some details to help you understand, because this is a very detailed teaching, because each individual line, it almost requires additional learning prior to this in order to understand each line. So I've gone line by line and explained every single aspect of this teaching. So I'll go through and explain a few of these, and then as you guys have questions, I'll answer them for you guys. But in terms of going through each individual line, I wouldn't be able to in the time we have in class, but you have this in the book. So this first line where he says, "This world is burning," what he's referring to here is the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots or the three fires. We refer to them as the three fires. This is craving, anger, and ignorance. That because of craving, there's this mental longing and strong eagerness in the mind. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings. If it doesn't get what it wants, it moves to these painful feelings, oftentimes anger, frustration, irritation. And that's that second poison, the anger, the hostility, the bitterness. And then the mind either pushes people away with aversion, or it becomes bitter and harsh and people leave out of your life, or you put your expectations on people and they choose to leave out of your life. Because of that, they feel pressured. And where all of this is coming from is what we refer to as ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. Today, this word ignorance is a derogatory word, and the Buddha, an enlightened being, isn't going to talk down to people in a derogatory way, but we're using this word ignorance to translate what the Buddha is referring to here, which I translate more to the unknowing of true reality. And it's because of this unknowing of true reality that craving and anger still persists. So even though we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance, craving continues. And because of craving, the mind continues to get angry. Whereas if you had wisdom, you would know how to eliminate craving and anger. So that's why you don't believe any of these teachings. You get to wisdom, where then you can understand craving and anger and how to uproot it and eliminate it. But you wouldn't be able to know how to do that without getting the wisdom. So craving, anger, and ignorance are these fires that are burning in the mind. And as you get closer and closer to enlightenment, you can look out at the world and you can see the whole world is burning, that these three fires are raging in the minds of massive amount of people in the world. There's very few enlightened beings in the world, and this is because the craving, anger, and ignorance, these fires are burning, and that's what he's talking about there. Then he says, harmed by contact. It caused disease a self. So the way the unenlightened mind thinks is because of its craving, it thinks that when you experience contact that is disagreeable and you experience painful feelings, the mind thinks that it's other people that are causing this. And this is due to the self, or the mind perceiving that there is a self. This is that personal existence view. So the Buddha refers to this as a disease, thinking that there's personal existence view. And as long as the mind has that personal existence view and it hasn't realized non-self, it will continue to experience discontentedness. So you need to eliminate all those fetters, including personal existence view. So the Buddha goes on and he talks about that the world is attached to becoming harmed by existence, but yet it has excitement in this very existence. So the unenlightened mind perceives that the painful feelings you're experiencing is because of somebody else, or because of the situation, or because of what's going on. But this is all wrong view. The mind experiencing displeasure or any kind of misery or despair or anything like this, any kind of discontent feelings, it's being caused by your own mind. That's right view. But because the mind has these fires burning, the mind is attached, or the world is attached and becoming harmed. But even though you're experiencing harm in the world, the mind excited about this existence. It wants to hold on. It's continuing to hold on to this world and not wanting to let go. So when there's excitement, then there's fear. So one of the ways to think about this is like, if you get all excited because you get a brand new phone, maybe you buy a brand new phone and it costs you $1,000 to perhaps buy that brand new phone. And now you're so excited that you got this brand new phone. But now there's fear that you're going to lose it or someone's going to steal it, right? So the Buddha is helping you to see here what your mind is doing, and you can independently verify this. If you've ever bought a brand new car and you got really excited about that brand new car, now you might be fearful that someone's going to scratch it or it's going to get in an accident. And then when you get fear, then there's stress. That you become stressed over this brand new car or this brand new phone that you purchased. There's this stress. So the Buddha is saying that the holy life is lived in order to abandon this existence and no longer continue to aspire to exist in the cycle of rebirth. You shouldn't have craving for existence, but you shouldn't have craving for non-existence either. That's what these next two lines that he's talking about here, is that those are each side of the spectrum. You would like to train your mind and get to this enlightened mental state where you can escape this whole continuous cycle of rebirth. Let's see. I've already kind of talked a little bit about that one and that one. I guess I'll just pause here and see if you guys have any questions on anything that we've read in this particular chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so we'll just go ahead and move on to the next chapter. Chapter 5. All right, Max, go ahead.
With destruction of excitement and craving comes destruction of discontentedness. Monks. A monk sees as impermanent the I which is actually impermanent, that is his right view. Seeing rightly, he experiences a fading away of strong feelings. With the destruction of excitement comes destruction of craving. With the destruction of craving comes destruction of excitement. With the destruction of excitement and craving, the mind is said to be well liberated. Monks. A monk sees as impermanent the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, which is actually impermanent. Seeing rightly, he experiences a fading away of strong feelings. With the destruction of excitement and craving, the mind is said to be well liberated. The Buddha repeats the entire statement for the remaining internal sense bases of the ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, and the 6 external sense bases of forms, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, mental objects.
Okay, thank you, Max. So here, the Buddha is once again honing in on central desire in the 6 sense bases, because the 6 sense bases are what's involved in fulfilling your central desires. Whatever the mind has central desire about, it's going to come in through the 6 sense bases of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. These are also referred to as the 6 doorways of discontentedness, because any discontentedness that you experience, it's going to be some kind of contact through these sense bases. So if you see something agreeable through the eyes, you're going to experience pleasant feelings, which are conditioned feelings. Whereas if you see something disagreeable through the eyes, you're going to experience painful feelings. And the same thing's happening with the ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And what the Buddha is doing here is he's reminding you that these sense bases themselves are impermanent, right? Because anybody who's starting out on the path to enlightenment needs to understand that very first pivotal teaching of the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing. There's not this fixed state. So not only are the individual sense bases themselves, the internal sense bases impermanent of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind, these things are all impermanent, but the things that the sense bases are observing, which are called the external sense bases, which are form, sounds, odors, flavors, physical objects, and mental objects. These things that are external here, and also the things internal to the mind, these are all impermanent as well. As long as the mind's going around thinking that these things are permanent, then what's going to happen is the mind's going to be craving and longing and yearning for these things. So the Buddha is saying, understanding that all of these things are impermanent, it's part of right view. That if you understand the universal truth of impermanence and that the sense bases, both internal and external, are impermanent, this is part of establishing right view. And then seeing rightly, you experience the fading away of strong feelings. So if you get really angry because of a certain thing, and that's what you've experienced in the past, as you start seeing rightly and you understand that these things are impermanent, now your mind can let go of its cravings, desires, attachments, and now you can have this fading away of strong feelings until the mind goes to frustration, irritation, annoyance, maybe a slight dislike, and then that same thing happens that you used to get so fiercely angry about, and now the mind's peaceful and you just kind of know how to apply wisdom and handle the situation. And that's what you'll experience as you're seeing rightly. As you have right view and you train your mind more and more, you'll observe this fading away of strong feelings. So with the destruction of excitement comes the destruction of craving. What the Buddha is cluing you into here is those pleasant feelings. An individual who's interested in getting to enlightenment, you have to understand the conditional pleasant feelings. If you thought what you were eliminating is just the painful feelings that are conditional, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment because you're still going to be allowing those conditioned pleasant feelings to come into the mind. So where you're eating that piece of chocolate cake, using that example, you enjoy it. Like, yeah, this is the best piece of chocolate cake I've had today. This is wonderful, right? But you're not allowing the mind to want it or crave it or long for it. I've got to have it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So when you see the mind longing and yearning and trying to build this excitement based on some condition, you restrain the mind, you pull it back. So if it's the holidays and mom calls up and says, hey, I'm going to come over for the holidays and see you guys. If you notice that there's excitement starting to come into the mind, you restrain it and you pull it back. And you might say something like, oh, great, Mom, I'm really glad you're coming over. It'll be wonderful to see you. That can be something you say, or any number of things. But what you're not interested in doing is the mind getting to a point where it's like, all right, you're coming over. Yes, I've been waiting for this. I'm so excited to see you, right? This is that conditional excitement. Because then what happens is a couple of days before the event, Mom calls up and says, hey, my plans have changed. I can't come. Well, if you allowed that excitement to come in, now you're going to be sad when Mom can't come. Whereas if it's just like, oh, great, Mom, you're coming over for the holidays. Be wonderful to see you. I'll see you soon, right? And now when Mom calls up and says, hey, I can't come. Okay, no worries. Maybe we'll get together another time. Right? You can maintain your contentedness, because if you don't allow the mind to crave it and get excited about it, then when it's not happening anymore, you won't lose that contentedness and that peacefulness. So by you restraining the mind from those conditioned pleasant feelings, the Buddha is saying that you eliminate craving and you eliminate those conditioned pleasant feelings, because as soon as you form a conditioned pleasant feelings, there's painful feelings waiting for you on the other side of that. It's only a matter of time. So he's reminding you of impermanence here. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move on to the next one, which is chapter 6. Go ahead, Max. Your mute's on.
Sorry about that. With the elimination of excitement comes the complete destruction of discontentedness. Puna, there are forms recognizable by the eye that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk does not seek excitement in them, does not welcome them, and does not remain holding to them, excitement is eliminated in him. With the elimination of excitement, Puna, there is the elimination of discontentedness, I say. There are, Puna, sounds recognizable by the ear, odors recognizable by the nose, flavors recognizable by the tongue, physical objects recognizable by the body, mental objects recognizable by the mind that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk does not seek excitement in them, does not welcome them, and does not remain holding to them, excitement is eliminated in him. With the elimination of excitement, Puna, there is the elimination of discontentedness, I say.
Okay, thank you, Max. This is the same thing that we've been talking about throughout today's class. It's just a different discourse to a different student, but essentially saying the same thing. So I'm not going to go through and teach this again since we've already been talking about it. I'll just see if you guys have any questions that you might need to get answered. And I don't suspect you guys have any questions because you haven't had any questions on the previous one. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Go ahead, Max. You can read this one too. So I'll have you read the first section and then I'll teach a bit and then we'll read the second section.
Mindfulness directed to the body, a strong post for mind. One dwells without having set up mindfulness of the body. Suppose, monks, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by strong rope. Having done so, he would tie the ropes together with a knot in the middle and release them. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, "Let me enter an anthill." The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter the water." The bird would pull another way, thinking, "Let me fly up into the sky." The dog would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a village." The jackal would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a charnel ground." The monkey would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a forest." Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would be dominated by the one among them that was strongest. They would submit to it and come under its control. So too, monks, when a monk has not developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye pulls in the direction of agreeable forms and disagreeable forms are repulsive. The ear pulls in the direction of agreeable sounds and disagreeable sounds are repulsive. The nose pulls in the direction of agreeable odors and disagreeable odors are repulsive. The tongue pulls in the direction of agreeable flavors and disagreeable flavors are repulsive. The body pulls in the direction of agreeable physical objects and disagreeable physical objects are repulsive. The mind pulls in the direction of agreeable mental objects and disagreeable mental objects are repulsive. It is in such a way that there is non-restraint. Okay, so let me teach this part and then we'll talk about the next part. So it's important to understand what mindfulness directed to the body is. What this is part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that as you're training your mind in meditation and outside of meditation, you're developing awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. These are called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And if you can gain understanding and awareness of those 4 foundations of mindfulness, you can start to understand the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness that is about to arise in the mind. So before the mind gets angry or frustrated, or even those pleasant feelings, before the mind experiences any of those conditioned feelings, there's going to be some bodily sensation associated with that. Maybe tingling in the body, or heat rising up, or pressure in the face or the skull. Maybe you feel some tightening of the chest. There's going to be some bodily sensation associated with each individual discontent feeling. And if you can become aware of those bodily sensations and cut off and let go of discontentedness as a bodily sensation, you will have saved the mind the difficulties of needing to experience the feeling of discontentedness coming into the mind, any discontent feelings. So the Buddha is saying here that if you haven't developed that ability, it's like these 6 animals tied with a rope and there's a knot in the middle. And as these animals are pulling in all these different directions, when they all get tired, whichever one is strongest, like maybe the crocodile, all the other animals are going to be pulled towards the water and the crocodile is going to
went out, essentially. And he's saying if you don't have mindfulness directed to the body, you don't have awareness of the bodily sensations, your six sense bases are doing the same thing. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind, they're all pulling in different directions. And when they all get tired, whichever one is strongest, you're going to have the mind pull in that direction. So say you're in a conversation with somebody and you have a craving for maybe a handsome man or a beautiful woman in your life. And now you're having a conversation with a certain person and you see this beautiful woman or this handsome man walk by. Your eyes are going to pull in that direction because the mind's longing and yearning for that particular object of your affection. And this is because the mind isn't aware of its craving and it's not understanding the bodily sensation to be able to cut that off. The mind hasn't been restrained yet. So that's what the Buddha is describing here, because the six sense bases are going to pull in whatever direction, whichever one is the strongest. So even though you're talking in a conversation and you're hearing certain speech, your mind might go somewhere else as it sees this agreeable form of a beautiful woman or a handsome man walking down the street. So now the Buddha is going to describe, for one who has set up mindfulness directed to the body, the different experience that you're going to have as part of having this awareness of the bodily sensations.
One resides having set up mindfulness of the body. Suppose, monks, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would bind them to a strong post or pillar. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, let me enter an anthill. The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, let me enter the water. The bird would pull another way, thinking, let me fly up into the sky. The dog would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a village. The jackal would pull another way, thinking, let me enter eternal ground. The monkey would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a forest. Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would stand close to that post or pillar. They would sit down there. They would lie down there. So too, monks, when a monk has developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye does not pull in the direction of agreeable forms, nor are disagreeable forms repulsive. The ear does not pull in the direction of agreeable sounds, nor are disagreeable sounds repulsive. The nose does not pull in the direction of agreeable odors, nor are disagreeable odors repulsive. The tongue does not pull in the direction of agreeable flavors, nor are disagreeable flavors repulsive. The body does not pull in the direction of agreeable physical objects, nor are disagreeable physical objects repulsive. The mind does not pull in the direction of agreeable mental objects, nor are disagreeable mental objects repulsive. It is in such a way that there is restraint. A strong post or pillar, this, monks, is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, monks, you should train yourself thus. We will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body. Make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves.
Okay, thanks, Max. So here, the analogy is different. Instead of having 6 animals just tied at a knot, and then the strongest one is going to pull away, instead he's talking about tying these 6 animals to a post or a pillar. And now as these 6 animals pull and tug, they can't go anywhere because they're bound by this post and pillar. And eventually they get tired and they just sit down at the post and pillar and they basically submit to understanding that they can't move and they can't get away. And this is the same thing that the six sense bases will do. If you use those bodily sensations as your post and pillar, that now when the mind is pulling and longing in different directions, and you just keep coming back and coming back like you do in meditation, or the way that you do in daily life where you see the bodily sensations arising and you cut that off and let it go, this is restraining the mind and pulling it back. And over time, as you eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, the mind will no longer pull. Just like these animals, eventually they will stop pulling and they will just sit down by that post and pillar. And that's what the Buddha is describing here, is to be sure you develop this mindfulness of the bodily sensations. And you accomplish that through the breathing mindfulness meditation and being observant in your daily life, that while you're in meditation and you feel that itch on the skin or you feel some sensation on the body, just train the mind to keep coming back to the breath and coming back to the breath and coming back to the breath, being unaffected by that bodily sensation, but cutting off any thought that you're having and bringing the mind back to the breath. And then in daily life, where your cravings, desires, attachments are producing certain discontent feelings and you see those bodily sensations arising, try to cut those off and let them go. You won't be perfect at this as you're first starting to do it. Sometimes it's going to become a feeling in the mind, and try to cut it off there if you can. But more and more, become more aware of the bodily sensations and be more having more ability to cut them off and let them go as a bodily sensation. This is what's ultimately going to get rid of craving, desire, attachment in the mind. Questions on this chapter? Max, you have a question?
Yes. Sorry. As someone that's enlightened, would they find basically like everything is beautiful? Like you're passing by someone, man or woman or whatever, oh, they're very beautiful, or you smell something, you know, a flower or whatever, like, oh, that's a beautiful smell or whatever, versus, you know, something that, you know, maybe wouldn't smell so great. You know, someone that would be enlightened may think that that's a beautiful smell. You know, like basically like everything's beautiful, or what?
In my opinion, an enlightened being can see beauty in everything, but you also know when something smells not well, but you're not repulsed by it. So if you walk by a sewer and you smell a sewer, you know that the smell is you know, quite strong, and maybe you might even talk about it as being horrible, but you're not repulsed by it. It's just it's a really bad odor, and you know that that odor is impermanent, so you don't have any discontent feelings as part of it. So you're not like, oh my goodness, that's the most horrible smell, how could anybody have the sewer smelling that way, or whatever it might be. Instead of like going into all that discontentedness, it's just like, that's an interesting smell. Okay, well, let's just keep walking to make sure that this is impermanent, right? As impermanent as it can be. So you'll know things that smell good and things that don't smell good, or you'll know that this piece of chocolate cake tastes really wonderful and maybe something else doesn't taste so well, but you could still eat that thing and you're not repulsed by it. You're not experiencing agitation or frustration. Same thing with the smell or anything else.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Let me see if we have anything coming in anywhere else. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else, so let's go on to the next chapter, which is chapter 8, the simile of the tortoise. All right, I've taught this simile recently, so what I'll do is just kind of summarize it for you guys. This was just in the previous book. What the Buddha talks about here is a tortoise that is walking on the bank of a lake or a river, and there's a jackal that's coming, and it sees this turtle, and the turtle sees the jackal as well, and the turtle pulls in its limbs, because the turtle has 6 limbs. It has a head, it has 2 feet, or I'm sorry, 4 feet, and then it's got the tail. So it's got these 6 limbs, or these 6 extensions. And as the limbs are extended, the jackal can grab it and rip it out of the shell and now eat it. But because the tortoise saw the jackal, it pulls in its limbs and holds them in so that the jackal can't get to it. And if it sits there long enough, the jackal will lose interest and it'll leave. And the Buddha talks about this in terms of the six sense bases, that what you should do is you should pull in your six sense bases and not extend them out and allow your cravings, desires, attachments to be triggered. Over time, you won't have those craving, desire, attachments, but while you have them, you need to be observant of the mind in these six sense bases. So let's just say, for example, I'm trying to get rid of the craving of coffee, and I have gone maybe 3 weeks without drinking a coffee. And now I know that I'm walking down the street and there's a coffee shop up here. And I'm going to smell this aroma of the coffee coming out, and I know it's coming. So I can kind of be observant of the mind and just kind of walk and just be really diligent to observe the mind and not allow it to get pulled into the coffee shop, for example. Or maybe I might choose to walk down a different street, perhaps, right? You can choose for yourself what you might decide to do, but you're not interested in the mind pulling and bringing you into this coffee shop, because there you know that you might drink that coffee. Or we could use it as a bar or some other thing, right? Any kind of craving, desire, attachment that your mind might have. So that's where you use this particular simile for that purpose. So let's see if there's any questions on this. Yep, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's see chapter 9. This is also a simile that I've taught recently. This is the simile of the bowl of oil. This is where the Buddha talks, again, I'll just summarize it rather than read it, is he talks about on one side, there's the most beautiful girl of the land who's singing. On the other side, there's a big crowd, and you're walking with this bowl of oil filled all the way up to the rim, and there's someone behind you with a sword that if you drip even one drop of oil out of that bowl, they're going to chop off your head. And he's describing this as mindfulness directed to the body, that you should be observant of the four foundations of mindfulness in these six sense bases in the same way that you would be observant of that bowl of oil. That if you were walking with this bowl of oil filled up to the rim and someone was literally going to cut off your head if you dropped any little drop of oil, you would be really observant of that oil and making sure that you walk and you don't look to the most beautiful girl singing and you don't look to the crowd and you're not affected by either of those, but you're going to stay utterly focused on this bowl of oil. So the Buddha is saying this is the same way you should function in daily life related to the mindfulness of the bodily sensations, is be that aware of these bodily sensations that as soon as they arise, you can cut them off and let them go. All right. Let me see if you guys have any questions on this. All right, I'm not seeing any questions on this particular simile. So let's go to the last one, which is the last chapter for today. This is also one that I've covered recently. This is about meditation, and the Buddha's walking you through, helping you to understand how to develop your meditation practice. So I will read this for you and then open up to any questions you guys have. It's titled Great Fruit and Benefit of Breathing Mindfulness Meditation, or Anapanasati, which is the Pali word for breathing mindfulness meditation. Monks, mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. And how, monks, is mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and benefit? Here, monks, a monk having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him, just mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows, I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. It is, monks, when mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation is developed and cultivated in this way, that it is of great fruit and benefit. When, monks, mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation has been developed and cultivated in this way, one of two fruits may be predicted, either final knowledge or wisdom in this very life, or, if there is a residual of clinging, the state of non-returner. So here the Buddha is going through his guidance for meditation and helping you to understand how to do breathing mindfulness meditation. During his lifetime, people will go out into the forest, or they would go to the foot of a tree or an empty hut, and they would sit down and do meditation. But he also teaches lying, standing, and walking meditation as well. But here in the seated position, he talks about crossing the legs, straightening up the body. By having the upper body straight and erect, it keeps the mind attentive and alert during your meditation. And then you set up mindfulness or awareness of mind in front of you before you start meditating. You don't just plop down into meditation. You start gaining your awareness of mind. That's where he says, set up mindfulness in front of him, that you start developing this awareness of mind. And now, starting to become aware of the mind, you breathe in and you breathe out, starting to establish the breath. This is what I guide students in as they're learning meditation. And then he teaches to be aware of the breath, whether it's a long breath or it's a short breath, be aware of it. Then, as you're starting to focus on the breath, start becoming aware of the entire body. And as you start noticing bodily sensations, calm those bodily sensations through the mind. Train the mind to be able to calm those bodily sensations. Now, as you're starting to do that, you might experience joy or peacefulness starting to arise in the mind. And as you notice this joy or peacefulness coming into the mind, just focus on the breath. Keep coming back to the breath. Don't allow the mind to indulge in that joy or that peacefulness. You know that it's there, but don't allow the mind to indulge in it. Just keep coming back to the breath, coming back to the breath, coming back to the breath. Then when you're experiencing mental activity, meaning there's certain thoughts that arise or things like this, the Buddha is teaching you to calm those. And the way you calm those is bring the mind back to the breath. There's other teachings where he talks about cutting it off and letting it go. Here he's saying calming the mind and bringing the mind back to the breath. And now as you experience the mind and gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, liberating the mind, also, as this is all happening, you just keep bringing the mind back to the breath. Where you're noticing certain sounds or certain sensations or anything like that, just reflect on impermanence and know that those things are impermanent. So if you're in meditation and you're focused on the breath and there's a thought that comes up, just know that that thought's impermanent, cut it off and let it go. Come back to the breath. Or if you're on the breath and you notice a sound, just know that that sound is impermanent and bring the mind back to the breath. Don't get frustrated that you heard a sound or irritated, or if there's some light or something like this. Just know that all these things are impermanent. Keep bringing the mind back to the breath. You should get to the point where your mind is so peaceful that you understand that all these things are impermanent around you, that if you died in that moment of meditation, you'd be completely fine with that. That you aren't holding on to anything in the world, that you've let go of everything because you understand impermanence. And your mind can get to utter peacefulness and joy because you've gotten to the point where you've trained your mind that all these things are impermanent and not allowing your mind to hold on to anything. And then there's this fading away of strong feelings. There's the elimination of strong feelings. And there's this letting go where the mind has let go. And then the Buddha is saying, okay, if you train in this way, there's one of two things that could be predicted. Either you're going to get to final knowledge in this very life, which if you get to final knowledge, that's enlightenment, that you've fully cultivated all the wisdom of this path, and now your mind has fully developed wisdom or right wisdom. You've eradicated all the fetters, including the fetter of ignorance or unknowing a true reality, and now the mind's enlightened. So you're either going to get to enlightenment if you meditate in this way, or if there's a residual amount of clinging, he's saying you're going to get to the state of non-returner, which is the third stage of enlightenment, which is just short of enlightenment. And if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you'll move to the heavenly realm in your next existence, and you will attain enlightenment in that existence. So he's saying one of these two things are going to happen if you train your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation. Either you're going to get to enlightenment, or you're going to get to the state of non-returner, where you'll get to enlightenment in your next life from the heavenly realm. So this is his guidance on meditation. You don't need to think about each one of these statements while you're in meditation, because the guidance that I give you in meditation is incorporating all these things into that. But instead, he's just providing you the detailed step-by-step. This is how he would have guided somebody in meditation. And then ultimately, you would have been meditating on your own. And I incorporate these things into the way that I provide guidance. But it's helpful to know what the Buddha is guiding you to here, because then if you're in meditation and your mind moves off the breath, you can say, oh yeah, that's right, impermanence, come back. Or if you're in meditation and you hear a sound, oh yeah, that's right, that sound's impermanent, come back to the breath. And this can really help you develop your meditation practice. So let me know what questions you guys have on this by putting it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and then I'll see your question and be sure I help you. So here we have a question coming in from Bruce. He says, I always get confused by this teaching. If I'm experiencing and reflecting on things during breathing mindfulness meditation, instead of cutting off thoughts and sensations off, I'm not focused on the breath. Yeah, so what this guidance is that the Buddha is giving you is essentially helping you understand what are the potential options of what you do in meditation. He teaches to focus on the breath. That's what he's sharing in this meditation. But as your mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and let it go and come back. And if reminding yourself of something like impermanence helps you to do that, then so be it and use it. Or like, for example, in meditation, if you experience this peacefulness and joy come into the mind, instead of indulging in that, you'll know to just bring the mind back to the breath, or some of these other things that he's talking about. He's not suggesting that you literally think about each individual one of these steps as you're meditating. He's just reminding you that as these things occur in meditation, keep coming back to the breath, keep coming back to the breath, keep coming back to the breath. That's the underlying guidance that he provides here and at his other teachings as well. So don't feel like you need to be reminding yourself of these things while you're meditating, but just stay focused on the breath. And if the mind moves off the breath, come back to the breath. That's what you would like to keep doing. All right, let's see. Jacqueline has something here. She's saying on Facebook, one could definitely enjoy the coffee aroma while passing by, but not have the desire or craving to stop for coffee. Exactly. Right. You can go by, and if you're know that you're struggling with the craving for the coffee. Now you can be more diligent, right? Because there was a time where I was working to get rid of coffee and I wasn't diligent. And I walked by the coffee shop, I turned the corner, and boom, this aroma came out, and boom, I was right in the coffee shop, standing in line to get my coffee, right? And that was the very last coffee that I ever had, and it was only a third or a half of it, and I threw it away and decided I'm never going to have coffee again. But I was building up to that. I was working up to that. And you can get pulled in by that aroma. That's that sense base. That craving is in there, and it can get triggered when you smell that aroma. So it's possible. Like when I walk past the coffee shop now, it's like, that's coffee. Interesting. Wonderful smell. But there's no craving there to go in there and actually have a coffee. In fact, I've gone into coffee shops now with students who are interested in getting a coffee, and I'll sit there with them while they drink their coffee because they're asking questions about the teachings of the Buddha. And I smell the coffee, and it's like, oh, great, that's a wonderful smell. But there's no desire, there's no craving or longing to go order a coffee because I know the harm that this causes to my mind and my body, and I'm not interested in experiencing that. So I've let that go. So yes, you can enjoy and know that that smells quite wonderful, and just choose not to drink the coffee. And you're doing that out of wisdom and discernment, and that's a choice that you're choosing to make. Okay, Bruce is saying, thank you so much, Teacher David, for your guidance and sharing of the teachings. And thank you, Max, for reading chapters for us today. May you all be well. Wonderful, Bruce. Thank you for your kind words. All right, so it looks like that's everything for today's class. I will just end today's class by thanking you all, just as Bruce has done. I end each class thanking you guys for joining class. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your dedication and diligence to learning. Yes, thank you, Max, for reading. That's wonderful to help read the chapters. And anytime any of you guys, other folks, would like to come into Zoom or come in and read from Zoom, you're more than welcome to join. This is a great way. If you have any kind of shyness, this is a great way to put the mind into the situation that it might fear or it might have shyness about. And then you can overcome that challenge, overcome the craving, desire, attachment that's causing that shyness or any other discontent feelings to arise, and maybe feel reluctant to do something like that. That's one of the ways to actually train. So thank you all for your dedication and diligence to learning. Next week, we're going to be in the same volume 4, and we're going to be in chapters 11 through 20. You're welcome to study those before and or after class. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be in volume 1, chapter 16, which is titled Dissolving the Ego. Ego serves no purpose. Here we're going to dive in deep into 2 of the fetters, personal existence view and conceit, so that you can understand what these are. And then I'm going to teach you how to eradicate them and eliminate them from the mind. So we're going to talk about what these fetters are, the complications that you're experiencing because of these fetters, and then what you can do to actually eliminate them. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing breathing mindfulness meditation. So you're welcome to attend any of these classes. I invite you to attend any of them. And if you can't attend live, there's always the replay on YouTube, Facebook, or on the podcast. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.